Son abandons his father in the middle of nowhere. The next day, the old man becomes a millionaire. In a gripping and heart-wrenching drama, discover the story of a son who left his father helpless to fend for himself. A journey filled with bitter choices and devastating consequences, revealing the shattered bonds of a torn-apart family. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel Unbelievable Lives and leave your like. In the living room, old Mr. Carter, confined to a wheelchair, chuckled cheerfully while watching a comedy show. When he saw his son Caleb pass by, a man whose heart seemed devoid of affection, he tried to invite him to join, hoping to find a trace of company and warmth. But Caleb's response was cold and harsh, full of disdain and cruel words. The father, with eyes saddened by his son's words, retreated in his chair, feeling abandoned even within his own home, once filled with love and laughter. Caleb, immersed in his own thoughts and annoyances, continued on his way, unconcerned about the pain he had caused. He had distanced himself from love and respect for his father, immersed in a world of selfishness and ingratitude. Mr. Carter had been living with Caleb since the death of his wife, and the eldest son, devoid of children or a partner, had been designated to take care of him, despite his reluctance. Caleb longed for freedom, for carefree nights, but it was the unwanted responsibility that fell upon his shoulders. While his siblings, though they loved their father, couldn't take on such commitment, occupied with their own family and financial responsibilities. And so, the man who had once been a home of laughter and love turned into an empty place, where the pain of abandonment echoed through the walls. All because love and gratitude were overshadowed by the bitterness and lack of compassion of a son who had forgotten the meaning of caring and loving. While others navigated through the tumultuous academic life, the grandson's visit became the only ray of light in Carter's cloudy days. His smile and the children's joy dissipated the shadow of abandonment and neglect, except for Caleb. Despite his deep love for his father, Caleb treated him with disdain, providing only the essentials for survival. Caleb deeply resented the weight of responsibilities, seeing his father as a burden that prevented him from living fully. In the son's distorted view, Carter was an obstacle, consuming resources and freedom. The elderly man, in turn, longed for a gesture of affection, but Caleb remained indifferent, immersed in his selfishness. On a fateful day, after dealing with shopping for the elderly, Caleb returned furious over a flat tire. In a fit of anger, he blamed his father for the incident, pouring out cruel words without any compassion. Carter's eyes filled with tears as he apologized, but Caleb interrupted with a hardened heart, uttering painful words, expressing his disdain and denying any paternal bond. That day, marked by unpleasant events, reflected the harsh reality of a relationship torn apart by resentment and lack of understanding. The father, starved for love and attention, found himself facing a son unable to see beyond his own frustrations and obligations. The cycle of hurt and distance seemed to grow, making denser the atmosphere of that once laughter-filled and loving house. The frail old man plunged into a sea of sadness, tears carrying the weight of a life of love and sacrifice. The sobs were echoes of a melody of pain, echoing the ignored paternal love. Apologizing for being a burden, Carter was left alone, abandoned in the living room as the night fell. In the silence of the house, only Mr. Carter's soft sobs echoed. Caleb, undisturbed by his father's pain, shouted his anger, refusing to help him get into bed. The cold of winter invaded the space, stiffening the elderly man's soul as he fell asleep in the uncomfortable chair. Meanwhile, Caleb, immersed in his own bitterness, checked messages in the family group, seeing the success of the youngest brother in an internship. This news sparked a dark thought in his heart. With a Machiavellian plan in mind, Caleb smiled as he slept, anticipating the steps of the next day. As the sun rose, the house remained shrouded in darkness. Caleb, waking up, found his father still in the living room, asleep in an uncomfortable position, suffering from the cold. Upon waking his father, the frightened eyes met those of the son. Amidst tears, Carter apologized, expressing his desire to take care of himself. Surprisingly gentle, Caleb reassured him and took him to his room, dressing him in warmer clothes, a rare kindness after so many moments of disdain. That morning, although it began with a great breakfast served by Caleb, soon brought suspicion when he said it was time to leave. Taking old Mr. Carter to the car, Caleb led him to think they were going to visit his brother, Fred, to congratulate him on his new job. The old man was happy at the prospect of seeing his son, sharing lively stories along the way. However, upon arriving at Fred's house, Caleb left him outside, rang the doorbell, and quickly returned to the car. The father, stunned, called for Caleb, perplexed by the situation. Without mercy, Caleb said that Fred's problem was no longer his, that he no longer wanted the father under his responsibility. Before Fred could respond, Caleb left, leaving Mr. Carter in shock and despair. He felt abandoned, heartbroken, lost in a cold and unfamiliar world. The old man's tears mingled with the drizzle, reflecting the pain of a rejected father and the echo of a betrayed love. He wondered if he had been such a bad father to deserve such abandonment, feeling deep sadness as the car drove away, leaving him with growing despair. The feeling of emptiness and endless loneliness consumed Carter as he pleaded for emotional rescue, for a gesture of affection. He wondered how his son, whom he had raised with so much love, could abandon him in such a cruel way. It was an endless nightmare where hope seemed to have been swallowed by darkness. Pause in the story. If you were in the shoes of this poor old man, what would you do? How would you feel? Share in the comments. Now, back to our story. Caleb returned home, feeling a strange sense of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He sighed, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. However, his house was empty, with no one to care for, no one to bother him. The responsibility of taking care of his father was now in someone else's hands, and Caleb was ecstatic about his newfound freedom. However, destiny seemed to have reserved an ironic fate for him. Not a month had passed since he abandoned his father at his brother's doorstep when he realized he had been removed from the family group. Initially, the idea of not being judged by the family made him happy. He didn't hold much esteem for them, so he didn't care much. But a revelation from a neighbor changed everything. The old Mr. Carter, whom he had so much scorned, had become a millionaire, the sole relative of a distant uncle who had left him a huge inheritance. Caleb, incredulous, was stunned. His adoptive father, who had never known his biological family, had now inherited a fortune. Feeling entitled after years of care and much more, Caleb wanted his share. He believed it would be worth keeping the old man alive after all. Determined, Caleb went to Fred's house to seek his part of the inheritance. Caleb knocked on Fred's door, trying to get in to speak with his father. However, he was met with scorn and rejection. Fred pointed out his abandonment, accusing him of negligence and renouncing the family, claiming that Carter had disowned Caleb. Incredulous and shocked, Caleb demanded to see his father, but Fred kicked him out, leaving him consumed by a whirlwind of emotions. The door was firmly closed, leaving Caleb outside, tormented by his anger, frustration, and regret. He reflected on his wrong choices, on the irreparable betrayal, and on the broken family ties. His conscience, marked by remorse, weighed heavily. He felt he had been the architect of his own downfall. Still, in his greed, he sought justice to claim his share of the inheritance. However, his abandonment of his father echoed in the courtroom, and he faced consequences for his inhumane attitude. Caleb's life collapsed when his family rejected him, turning their backs on him, just as he had done to his own father. The final blow was when his father stated that he was not his son, that sons do not do what he did. Caleb realized the magnitude of his mistake, while his father found joy and comfort with his other children, who treated him with love and understanding. While the siblings united to take care of the father, Caleb found himself alone, rejected, and without the fortune he so desired. He realized that his quest for solitude came, but not in the way he expected. Day after day, he faced the harsh clarity of truth, understanding the depth of his actions and the precious value of paternal love. If you enjoyed the story, the next video that will appear on your screen will also be emotional. Don't forget to subscribe to the Unbelievable Lives channel, and also leave your like and activate notifications so you don't miss our next stories. A big hug, and until the next narrative.